So I sat down to play Alan Wake 2 after all these years. The wait had been excruciating, more than a decade since the first game. And the first one? A total cult classic. It was weird, atmospheric, layered in symbolism. You were this tormented writer fighting literal darkness with a flashlight and your words. It was unique. It left an impact. So naturally, when they finally announced the sequel, I was beyond hyped. But man, what I got wasn't what I expected. Not even close. Don't get me wrong, Alan Wake 2 is visually stunning. The production value is top-notch. The lighting, the eerie atmosphere, the audio design, it's all incredibly polished. But as I kept playing, something started gnawing at me. Something I couldn't ignore. It was like I'd bought a ticket to a concert by my favorite band, and they handed the mic to someone else halfway through the first song. Alan Wake isn't even the main character in Alan Wake 2. Most of the game is spent playing as someone completely new, Saga Anderson, an FBI agent who just drops into the Alan Wake universe like she owns the place. And suddenly, everything starts revolving around her. The pacing, the plot, even the mystery, it's all tailored around Saga. Alan, meanwhile, is pushed into the background, trapped in some bizarre metaphysical limbo, scribbling nonsense on chalkboards and mumbling in cryptic metaphors. It felt like I was playing Saga Anderson, a psychological detective thriller, featuring a brief cameo by Alan Wake. I kept waiting for the story to circle back, for Alan to break out, reclaim the spotlight, become central again. But it never really happens. And as I got deeper into the game, the realization hit me. They didn't just sideline Alan, they rewrote the entire narrative to make him seem like a problem. They turned Alan into this manipulative figure. He's no longer the flawed but sympathetic hero from the first game. Now, he's portrayed as this ominous, shadowy writer who's been pulling the strings in Saga's life without her consent. There's even a scene where someone says, and I'm not paraphrasing here, that Alan is just another white man trying to control a black woman's life through his writing. And that's when I realized what was going on. This wasn't a continuation. It was a takeover. This game wasn't interested in Alan's story anymore. It wanted to tell Saga's story, and it wanted to make a point while doing it. Now, before anyone twists this, I'm not saying you can't introduce new characters. I'm not saying Saga shouldn't exist. If anything, she could have been a great protagonist in her own standalone game. But when you title your game Alan Wake 2, and then treat Alan like an afterthought, you're misleading the audience. You're baiting longtime fans into playing something that's not actually meant for them. And it goes deeper. Remember the clicker? That symbolic item from the first game that Alan used to manipulate reality. A literal object tied to his trauma, his memories, his power as a writer. It was one of the most meaningful tools in the original story. In this sequel, it's teased, mentioned, then forgotten. He doesn't even use it because Saga does. It's like the writers dangled it in front of longtime fans to make us feel seen, and then quietly shoved it off the table. That's not a clever subversion. That's just disrespectful to the narrative you yourself built. It's not just Alan who's diminished. It's the entire Alan Wake mythos. The supernatural lore, the mystery of Cauldron Lake, the darkness, the metafictional elements that made the original game so unique. All of it feels like background noise now. Everything has been reoriented to focus on Saga and the message the writers wanted to push. And yes, that message is loud. Saga isn't just a character. She's a symbol. She's written to be flawless. Always right. Never questioned. And everyone around her either supports her or eventually becomes an obstacle. Even Alan. Especially Alan. There's this recurring motif in the story about her breaking free from Alan's influence. About rejecting the path he's written for her. And on paper, that could have been interesting if it was subtle. But it's not. The game actually leans into the idea that Alan is some kind of oppressive force, just because he's the writer and she's the character. The meta-message is clear. A black woman's story should not be controlled by a white man. And look, I get it. Art reflects society. Games are allowed to make statements. But this one? It doesn't feel like a statement made through storytelling. It feels like an ideological essay, clumsily shoved into a franchise that was never about this. At one point, I just sat back and asked myself, Who is this for? Is it for fans of Alan Wake? Definitely not. Is it for new players? Maybe. But then why saddle it with lore from a decade-old cult classic? And most importantly, if this story was really about Saga, why not just call the game Saga Anderson? The answer's obvious. It wouldn't sell. No one would buy Saga Anderson. But slap the name Alan Wake 2 on it? Now you've got attention. Now you've got legacy fans lining up, eager to return to the shadows of Bright Falls, only to discover that the game has very little interest in continuing the story they loved. Instead, it's about passing the torch, replacing the old protagonist, reframing him as the problem. And I can't help but feel like that's become a pattern in media lately. Replace the old hero, elevate the new one, and justify it by turning the original into some kind of symbol of the past that needs to be corrected or overcome. In this case, Alan Wake, a character defined by his inner turmoil, his struggle with creativity, his desperate fight for meaning, is reduced to a white man writing over a black woman's life. That's not just a misinterpretation of who he is. That's character assassination disguised as progress. And let's be clear, Saga could have been amazing. She could have been introduced gradually, developed organically, maybe even become a future co-lead in another game. But here, she's forcefully injected into the spotlight, while the guy whose name is on the title quietly fades into irrelevance. In the end, Alan doesn't win. He doesn't fight the darkness. He doesn't even get to use the symbolic tools that defined him in the first game. He becomes a pawn in a story that doesn't care about him anymore. He writes Saga's story, and then he disappears. That's not a torch being passed. That's a character being erased. And I think that's what stings the most. It's not just that Alan Wake 2 went in a different direction. It's that it did so while pretending to be something it wasn't. It wore the face of a beloved story while delivering something completely new, and then acted like we were the problem for noticing. Games are allowed to evolve. Franchises can change. But when you take a story that meant something to people, something unique and personal, and you twist it into an ideological mouthpiece while using the same name, that's not evolution. That's deception. This game should have been called Saga Anderson. And if the creators truly believed in her story, they wouldn't have needed to hide behind the Alan Wake brand to tell it. But they did. And that says everything. If you felt like something was off while playing Alan Wake 2, you're not crazy. If you wondered why Alan barely mattered, or why Saga seemed artificially perfect, or why the plot kept hammering you with subtext about race and control, you're not alone. This wasn't a sequel. It was a rebrand, a bait and switch. And honestly, Alan Wake deserved better. Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, leave a like, drop a comment, let's talk. And if you think I'm wrong, that's cool too. Let me know. I want to hear your side. Because discussions like these matter. They shape where games go next. And as for me, I'll be in the dark place, waiting for the real Alan Wake to come back. Stay awake, stay sharp, and stay honest.